Yeah, I'm excited to be here to talk about a very important topic, and that is how to get an investment in your company. But before I do that, I'm going to talk about something else, which is very important. I firmly believe that the idea of creating a global startup has been oversold, and that is everyone is trying to get to become the next Mark Zuckerberg. And sometimes they lose their way and find themselves in a very stressful, unwinnable situation. So I'm going to start by saying there's nothing wrong with creating a business that doesn't require an investor, where you can grow organically and sustain your lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's so much hype in the media about going global, getting an investor, and then blowing it up as soon as possible. But that has many consequences that you may not be aware of. The mental stress, the possibility of failure, and let's face it, 90+% will fail. So I'm going to start with that because I want you to have a balanced view of what it is to be an entrepreneur. Now with that, I'm going to take the other side and to talk about what it is to be an investor looking at your business. Okay, so let me quickly go through these slides. Do I have a clicker? Okay. Okay, briefly about my background. I'm a software entrepreneur. I built a company in the 90s. Seems like ancient history now. It was a B2B company that eventually I grew organically, no investors, and sold to Microsoft in 2001. Thereafter, I was the founder and chair of an angel network. I'm the chairman emeritus of Jumpstart, New Jersey Angel Network. And then I'm a new Puerto Rican. I've been here since January. I love it here, and unlike many others who come here for the benefits of Act 22, I really feel like I found my place. And the reason I feel that is because this is the place that's going through dramatic changes right now because of the crisis, and I feel like my background has been put to good use. And I want to make a commitment to figuring out how we can develop as an ecosystem. So I created the San Juan Tech Meetup, which is just an event to get everyone together to talk about entrepreneurship and innovation. Okay, so let's talk about the sources of capital, starting with the 4 Fs. And this is something I mentioned at the first San Juan Tech Meetup. You probably don't know about the 4 Fs. Founders, friends, family, and fools. Okay, those are the people who will give you money at the very beginning when you have an idea and nothing else. Next, there are individual angels who will, for whatever reason, decide that they should invest in you. And then followed by angel funds who, and Lylan will speak to this, they will invest at a slightly later stage, what they call seed stage or Series A, for larger amounts of capital. Finally, venture capital, and we all know what that's all about. And lastly, the IPO, and that's, to most of us, the home run, the dream that allows us to cash in, but it's actually nothing more than a capital raise. You're trying to raise money so you can continue to grow the company. So I'm going to talk about how individual angels make a decision on what to invest in. Now, the first thing you need to understand is angels are individuals, and their decision-making process is very personal. In other words, there's no set of rules that cover how an angel is going to make a decision on making an investment. But I've come up with my personal approach, a matrix that allows me to evaluate investments. And here, as you see, on one axis, I have the strength of the entrepreneur, and the other, the strength of the idea. And let's start with the obvious one. If the idea is weak and the entrepreneur is weak, it's clearly a no. Conversely, if we have the other combination, it's probably a yes. Now, I won't say always because there are so many other issues such as valuation and terms that may get in the way of the investment. But in general, I would be likely to take that investment very seriously. Weak entrepreneur, strong idea, that is almost always a no. Okay, and I've encountered many of these, and I get so excited about the idea, but when I look at it as a business proposition, it doesn't make sense because that entrepreneur doesn't have the skills to take the company forward. And most of the time, the money is then wasted because they don't know how to distribute, allocate, manage the funds properly, nor do they have the skill to manage the people. Now, this is an interesting one. A weak idea, but a strong entrepreneur. That is usually a yes, although it's very much a qualified yes, in that, as you know, most startups have to pivot in order to adjust to the market conditions. And if the entrepreneur is strong, they might start out with a weak idea, but then pivot to the right idea over time. So I would say right now, as an investor, the most valuable commodity that I look for is a strong entrepreneur. And often that means a second-time entrepreneur, somebody who's failed and realizes some of the mistakes made along the way. In fact, my best investment to date in terms of the rate of return is a gentleman who failed during the first .com, raised a lot of money, and then wound up in a situation where he was so diluted, even if the company succeeded, he would get nothing out of it. So he walked away from it. And then he came to me a few years later and asked me for some advice. And now his company is probably $50 million in revenue, growing at an exponential rate. And the investment that I made is probably 100x in that situation. So a strong entrepreneur with a weak idea is still worth investing in. Now, there are many permutations and combinations here that I won't go over, but this is a general set of rules. And if you look at this, you'll see that it's really about the entrepreneur. It's not about the idea, because whatever idea you have, somebody else has already thought of it. And somebody else may be better executing that idea than you. Let's talk about what a strong venture idea means. Well, it depends on the individual's background and the investor's background and preferences. For me, I like to look at software deals because that's the area I know. Other investors have a different background, a different set of preferences. So because you are rejected by an angel, well, that doesn't mean you're going to be rejected by all angels. It just means that you may not have found the right person to talk to. And when you do your homework to figure out who to talk to, you really should focus in on the background of that angel and their preferences before you talk to them, because you may be wasting your time if you don't. So as I said, these are some of the areas that I prefer: software, licensing, internet marketplace, and viral marketing. What makes a strong entrepreneur? And this is the really important issue here. The first, I would say, is business savvy. And to me, a lot of this seems like common sense, but I talk to some people who may have a strong scientific or technical bent, and they have no idea about how to create a business. They've created some amazing technology, but then they don't know how to take it forward. And so this is the first thing I look for in an entrepreneur. The second thing is this quality of persistence. And this is something that has to be balanced with coachability. So what does that mean? Somebody who's persistent is often very strong-willed and believes that the world should conform to his rules. And so that kind of person can often be uncoachable. And yet, in that person's journey, they need to be directed by a network of advisors and investors. So they need to be coachable. So this is a very careful balancing act that I think the investors who have some experience probably know how to see, how to find in a potential entrepreneur. How to pitch. Like a good story, the pitch must have a beginning, middle, and end. What does that mean? The beginning is the idea itself. You know, I have a great idea for a new app, software, whatever. The end is how you're going to profit from that idea, how to find an exit, how to find a buyer. But the most important in this is the middle. How do you take an idea and achieve success? And that is often a missing element in the stories that I hear. They often say something like, well, once we get 1 million users, then we can sell advertising. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, the whole point is, how do you get to that 1 million users? It's not about what happens at the end when you achieve that. So you really need to focus on the steps that take you from the beginning to the end. This is a graph that I created to illustrate what happens in the startup world. Whatever the technology or idea, there tends to be a curve associated with the number of startups. For example, let's say social media. Well, back about 10 years ago, there was a large number of social media startups and growing very quickly. And then after a few of them established themselves in the marketplace, fewer and fewer startups jumped into that market. For example, you would not think about competing with Facebook today. It would be suicidal. So I think we need to understand this curve and where you are in the curve with your idea. Are you at the beginning or are you at the end? Now, having experienced a lot of conversations here, most Puerto Rican startups are late to the game. Okay, they copy an idea from the States and they think, I'll do it here in Puerto Rico and then I'll expand to Latin America. And that is a very distasteful strategy from an investor point of view. The investors don't want to be late to the game, they want to be early to the game. And they want to be early in a way that they can catch the curve of user adoption before somebody else does. So I really want to work with the local startups to figure out how we can move up the curve and get over the hump to the early stage. And lastly, I'm going to close by saying that very soon I'm going to be launching something called the San Juan Capital Network, which will be a group of investors on the island, people like me, as well as local investors, who will get together and share deal flow, both from the island and from other places. And also, I'd like to just say that we are honored by the presence of angel investors from New York today, who will be helping to answer questions later on. But I really would like to create a bridge between San Juan and New York to try to get the investor community working together and sharing ideas and possibly deals. With that, let me turn it over to Lylan.
Hey guys, name is Lylan Masterman. I'm a seed and Series A investor in New York City with a firm called White Star Capital. White Star was named after the first cruise line to cross the Atlantic. So in a similar way, I invest and my colleagues invest in companies that are on both sides of the Atlantic and who see their addressable market as being on both sides of the Atlantic. Maybe not today, but sometime down the road. Give you an idea of what kind of checks a firm that our size does. We generally will want to invest at first $1 to $4 million in a company that's trying to raise around $2 to $12 million. The reason I say that is to understand the lifeline of fundraising, right? First, you would raise from someone like Ken as an angel investor, and then you start to succeed and grow, and then you approach the seed and series investors, which are more people like me. This is the team that we have, and what's interesting about this team is that we're all formed to have different skills. And so for entrepreneurs in the room, when you're talking to VCs, and if fortunately there are a few different VC firms that want to invest in you, one thing to look for is, does the VC firm have a variety of skill sets? Or do they have people that are tech geeks, people who really understand marketing, who really understand growth, who understand how to help you in a merger or an acquisition? And that's the kind of team that we've created. Like all firms should represent some kind of identity, some value to entrepreneurs. These are ours. I don't need to read through them. But ultimately, the important part is that a VC firm is not just there for capital, not just there to deploy money into you. If all you need is money, go to a bank, right? Find a way to get a loan. The reason that the venture capital firms exist is, yes, to invest money, but also at the same time to be part of your board, to be able to give advice. I learned a good expression a few weeks ago that I really appreciate it. As a CEO of a company or a CTO or CSO, you're in the weeds of the company, right? Day in and day out. And in most successful companies, the Facebook, the Googles of the world, etc., there will be one or two seminal moments in the history of the company where we'll take an outsider, someone who cares about the company, who's on the board, who's involved, who's not in the weeds, to say, hey, you know what? I'm seeing the world a little bit differently from my different seat, and here's how I think the company should be done differently, right? A different strategy, a different tactic. And there's one or two seminal moments in the lifespan of a company that can really change the trajectory. We have great companies. If a VC firm does invest in you, and they might ask you for these kinds of quotes, be generous. Ken talked about some of this stuff, and I want to be careful of time, so I'm skipping over a few of these. Here's the perfect story, right? The Google story. Started small. Started with two guys. There were students together, and they had some ideas, and they got an angel investor. Then they got seed and Series A investments. They had some traction along the way. I remember the first time in 1998, my office mate came to me and said, hey, I know about this new search engine. And we tried it out, and we searched for basic things, and we opened up Yahoo side by side, and the search results were so much better. And you want to have that continuous growth. Here's one company that we're an investor in that seems to be doing a similar kind of story. Dollar Shave Club. Raise your hand if you're familiar with the company a little bit. Right? They had this super viral video. It was funny. It was cool. People sent it around. But there's a real business there. And the real business is that they are gradually taking over the entire men's bathroom. Now, my shaving blades, my pre-shave, my aftershave, my hair products, and I'm not saying I use these products, but they even have butt wipes. And you can see how it's more than just a cute little video. And this is the kind of investment that we like to make that has the potential to continue growing exponentially. Ken talked about the investment process a little bit. I'll skip over this, but just focus on the three key tenets, right? Management and leadership. That's critical. Who are you? Do you have a good team that we want to back? The financial terms. Is the valuation reasonable? Is the amount of money that you're raising appropriate? And then what's your target market? Is it big? How competitive is it? There's a lifeline for how you guys go about interacting with a VC firm. And then there's a term sheet process. Make sure you have a good tech lawyer, right? There are some outstanding tech lawyers in each of the cities that we invest in. So we invest in cities like Stockholm, Berlin, Paris, London, Toronto, Montreal, New York. And in each of these cities, there are great tech lawyers who really get it. I highly suggest getting the best tech lawyer you can who lives and breathes these kinds of startup to VC negotiations. A generic lawyer is generally not the best choice. Now here's some topics we can talk about. And this was, what I did here is there's some key learnings that I've noticed here and at a conference in a different city I was at earlier this week of topics that came up when speaking with entrepreneurs. Some of these, I won't talk through all these, but if you're interested in talking about it in Q&A or afterwards, happy to do so. The first one is, why do VCs look for these billion-dollar businesses? What's wrong with a $10 million or $20 million acquisition by a Microsoft or a Google, right? Why don't we invest in that kind of company? And simply put, there are people who invested money into us. as a VC firm. And it's our job to, one, return the money back to them, and then two, return them a profit. And people like me, we only actually get any kind of meaningful money if we actually return a profit. Now, we don't have a crystal ball. We're going to make a lot of mistakes. We're going to invest in companies that will go bankrupt. And so as a result, to offset those companies that will go bankrupt or that might sell for the same valuation that we invested in, we need to have some home runs to offset that. And that's the key point. It's not that an exit of $20 million is a bad thing. For you, it can be a great thing if you haven't raised too much money. But understand, and there's a critical moment. Up until the day that you sign the contract to raise capital, you can sell the company for ever how much you want. But once we agree to work together, then we are together, right? And it's a shared decision. And with that, there are times where that very next day after you sign the contract, you could get that acquisition offer, and it might be my job to say, hey, you know what? I don't think that's the right thing anymore. That's not the goals that are aligned for us anymore. So be aware of that. The game changes, the process, your valuation changes whenever you do raise that venture financing. The VC math and the number of investments, right? This is something that I didn't understand back when I was on the entrepreneurial side of the table. Assume that I was at a $100 million fund. $100 million sounds, it is a lot of money. I wish I had $100 million. But $100 million fund. And then assume that for each investment the firm makes, at first we invest $2.5 million, and then we keep aside another $2.5 million to invest in you in the future. So that's a $5 million, really a $5 million invested into each company. So a $100 million fund divided by 5, that means we get to invest in 20 companies. This is very high level math. There are a lot of subtleties in this. But at a very high level, that means we get to invest in 20 companies. 20 companies over, say, 3 years. So that means we get to invest in around 7 companies per year. Now, as a firm, we probably see around 2,000 companies-ish, I don't know what the real number is, per year. So we get to invest in maybe 7 out of 2,000, 7 out of 3,000. So whenever I get excited about a company, that means that you're in that top 50 or top 100 where I want to spend some intellectual curiosity to get to know you better. At the same time, if I'm rejecting you, right, and saying, hey, you know what, now's not the right time for us to invest, you might still be on something great, but that we feel as a firm, we're concerned that it might not fall in that top 7 out of the couple thousand that we're going to see in the year. So that's why we have to be so picky and have to make so many rejections. It's not because we don't believe in you, it's just because we don't have that many companies to invest in. I'll end with the third one, and then we can do some Q&A, and we can talk about some of these later. Just feel free to ping me. And it's on the KPIs. There's some telltale signs. So keep in mind, as a seed and Series A investor, I'm investing in companies that have had some traction, right? Have had some progress. It's not an angel investment. That's happened before I look at the company. When I see a deck that the KPIs, the core KPI is, say for a B2C app, talks about the number of installs. I don't care, right? I'm sure there's all kinds of apps that you can buy and install. You can go and advertise your product, and you can get millions of installs. It'll cost you a lot of money, but you can get millions of installs. What I care about, if you're on the B2C side, is truly the usage, right? Think about WhatsApp. And back in the day when WhatsApp was starting to grow, it really didn't matter how many people had installed the app but not using it. What people cared about was that people were addicted to WhatsApp. They were using it every day. They were using it hours per day, and they were sharing it with their friends, right? That's that special finesse, that special energy that matters. And that's the kind of energy I look for in the KPIs, right? Do people love this? It doesn't matter if I love it. I'm just one person. Maybe I hate it. That's irrelevant. Do a lot of people like it? And the same idea on the B2B side. If you are selling to the enterprise and you're getting contracts here and there for 1 month, 2 months, that's nice. But what I look for, more often than not, is the monthly recurring revenue, that middle R, the recurring aspect. How much money is forecastable? When I see the revenue 6 months from now, that you can be pretty darn confident that it's not a guess, that future prediction is actually based in strong reality. So those are 3 of the points I wanted to discuss of best practices of stemming from recent discussions that I've had with entrepreneurs, both here and in a different city earlier this week. Thanks, guys.